AWS Elastic Beanstalk Service hands-on demo 2. In this section, let's look at some of the advanced capabilities of Elastic Beanstalk. So what are the objectives? We'll take a deeper look at the console, which is the Elastic Beanstalk console. We'll look at it from the perspective of logging, performance, scalability, and configuration, the environment configuration. So let's go ahead and do a quick demo. Here I am logged into my Elastic Beanstalk environment. I have, if you recall, 3 applications: Jumbotron, Yokonomo, and Zoomily. And Jumbotron application has 2 environments in it right here. Let's pick one of the environments. Let's pick the dev environment, and let's look at the console a little bit better. So when you click on the environment, any environment, you will see that there is the menu on the left hand side. The menu on the left hand side has something called dashboard. That's the main dashboard that kind of shows you the overall status of that environment. It's telling you that the health check is okay, that it's running version 2 of the application, it's running Tomcat 64-bit Amazon Linux on Java 8, it's Tomcat 8, and some recent events. Then you have this menu item called configuration. You click on that. This is a very important page, because in this page you're able to configure a lot of things related to your environment. If you click on scaling, and you're able to change the scaling parameters. For example, the environment type, you can change from single instance to a load balancing environment. You can also choose the availability zone where you want your application to run. You can also choose the time-based scaling. You can say that you want the application to launch at a certain time and shut down at a certain time. You can do that too. There's also instances. You can decide to change your instance. Notice right now it's t1.micro. If you want to change your instance to be small or medium or large, you can do that right here. There is also changing your capacity of the storage. And then there is notifications. You have said that you want to send the notifications to karthik.shyamsundar@gmail.com. That's where all the notifications will go. And by the way, if I log into my email, I would have gotten a notification which says, hey, do you want to accept the notification? And only when you accept the notification does it actually start sending you the notification. Until then, it doesn't. So it actually makes sure that it's a valid email address. And there's also something called configuration, which is where you can change some JVM parameters. We'll come back to this. And then there's updates and deployments, and there's health. Okay, so that's all related to configuration. Then there's logs. You can see the recent logs, the last 100 lines of the logs. You can see that. So it's going in and fetching the logs. There it is. If you click on download, it shows you all the log files. There are several log files, so it's showing you the last 100 of the several log files. Remember, we talked about different log files that are there. It's the Tomcat 8 host manager, Elastic Beanstalk log. There's the access logs. All the logs files are available for you if you want to access it. You can download it right here. You can click on it and it will download it, as you can see. You can also ask for the complete list of the logs. There's also monitoring. So you can see it's giving you information about your instance. There's also alarms that you can configure. There are events. You can look at the events at different time intervals, right? So there are events right there. And there's also tags. You can tag your environment. So in this case, I added a tag called env, which is called dev. There's already a few tags that's already there for you. Right? So that's kind of giving you a better idea as to what an environment looks like. In our case, we have 2 environments, dev and test, and similar thing exists for the test environment too. Okay, so what about performance? Let's talk about performance. Let's go back to our dev environment. In our dev environment, let's say that we want to improve the performance of our instance. Well, we want to maybe change the JVM settings. So what we would do for that is go to configuration, go to software configuration, and change the memory. You want to make sure that if you change the memory from 256 to 512 megabytes, that you have enough RAM in the machine. You have to have the appropriate machine type. That's something that you have to be careful about. So let's do that. Let's talk about scalability. Well, if you want to scale, which means you want to make it a larger machine, you can do that by clicking on configuration and then clicking on instances. It says t1.micro. Let's go ahead and change that to medium. Right, I'm changing that to a medium. And then I'm going to do an apply. When I do the apply, it's going to make a change. It's saying, hey, you know what, it's not a free tier. Are you sure you're willing to take the charges? Yeah, I'm willing to take the charges. There it is. It's making a change. So now my dev environment is going to be a medium-sized environment. All right, so if I go back and look at the Jumbotron app, the environment is coming up. Okay, it's updating the environment at this point. I'm going to wait until the update takes place. Okay, you saw how it went from severe to no data. Severe was when the health check was not able to get any response back from the server, and then now it's beginning to get the response from the server. It's turned yellow at this point. The environment is coming up. It's green at this point. So it was just updating the environment. It was launching the machine, and when it was launching the machine, it took some time for it to come up. That's all happened. So when I go in there, everything is good. Everything is good. So if I click on the environment and launch the application, I should see version 2.0, which is what we had in the dev environment. All right, so it's all good to go. My environment is up and running. And if I actually click on the environment and look at the configuration, look at the instance, it's medium at this point. So I moved to medium. Now, that's great. I have made my dev environment to be a medium-sized box. That's vertical scalability. What if I want to make my test environment to be the same thing too? This is where configuration comes into play. What I could do is go to my configuration, which is where I am, and say save configuration. I'm going to say dev test configuration. I'm going to give it a name because I want the configuration to be the same. Do a save on it. So I've saved all the configuration parameters for my dev environment in this thing called configuration name called dev test configuration. Now what I can do is go back to my Elastic Beanstalk test environment, which is still running. If you think about it, it's running the old micro. What I can do is I can upgrade my test environment. I can say I want my test environment to use the same configuration as the dev environment. So I simply go in, I say load the configuration. I want this configuration to be loaded, and I say load. Do you want it to be loaded in test? Yep, load it. So now I'm going to load the same configuration into my test environment. So now my test environment is also going to be upgraded. So you can see how I can scale, in this particular case, vertically scale my dev environment. I added a bigger machine. I made the machine to be a bigger machine. Now I can apply the same environment change to my test environment from dev to test. That's pretty cool. Right, so that's coming up. While that's coming up, what I would like to do is demonstrate launching a horizontally scalable environment. When we want to launch a horizontally scalable environment, we have to choose the load balanced environment. So that's what we're going to do. So for production, let's go ahead and choose a load balanced environment. So let's do that. For the Jumbotron application, I'm going to go in and launch a new environment. This time I'm going to create a web server, which is going to be a Tomcat web server, and it's saying, do you want to use the saved configuration? No, we'll just use the default one. It says, do you want to choose the platform version? Well, let's go ahead and choose the saved configuration because we want the same thing for production, except we want more machines. So we'll go ahead and choose the saved configuration. If I choose the predefined configuration, then of course I have the option to change my platform and things like that. We won't do that. We'll go ahead and use the saved configuration. They say, do you want a single instance or load balanced instance? We want the load balanced instance. Go ahead, click next. I'm going to go with the default application, which is the application that was already loaded in the environment, which was the dev environment. And in this particular case, it says deployment limits, load balanced environment. You may have more than one machine. In this particular case, it's saying when you want to update your application, when you want to update it, do you want it to be updated 100% at one time, or do you want it to be 50% at one time, or 25% one time? That's what it's saying. Or do you want it to be updated one instance at a time? So it's allowing you to change your deployment window. If you have 10 machines, you can update one machine at a time. If you have 10 machines, you can say you want to update 50% of the machine. That's how you will change the percentage here. You'll say 50% of the machine should be updated first, and then 50% will be updated. In this case, let me go ahead and say everything will be updated. Next, that's going to be my environment. I'm going to change this to prod. And then I'm going to click next. I don't want to create a database instance. Click next. Mr. Velo is the key. Everything else is good. Enhanced reporting. Application health check. You can also give a URL that the load balancer is going to call upon to verify that your application is correct. So this is a special URL that you can provide in your application. For example, if you look at my application, I have a URL called healthcheck.jsp, which always returns all good. Now this particular JSP page can talk to the database, make sure the database is up, and then return a 200. If this particular URL returns a 200, that means my application is good to go. So I already have coded this particular URL. What I'm going to do is say healthcheck.jsp. That's the URL that it's going to call upon whenever it wants to check if our application is working properly. Otherwise, it will take the application out of the rotation of the load balancer. Okay, everything else is good. Click next. Environment tags. I'm not going to give any tags right now. Instance profile. This is your permissions. We'll take the default. And then we can launch. Click on launch. That's going to launch my production environment. This is going to be a load balanced environment. While it's doing that, let's go back and look at our EC2 instances. We already have the dev and the test. We're going to get a production environment. We are also in our EC2 going to get a load balancer, hopefully. It hasn't happened yet. It should be happening soon because it's a load balanced environment. So let's go back to our Elastic Beanstalk and see how that's going. There's our production environment. It's coming up. It says created the load balancer. So let's go ahead and see if the load balancer is really created. EC2, load balancers. Oh yeah, there is a load balancer available. There's already a load balancer. It's the Elastic Beanstalk load balancer. Cool. Let's go back. Let's look at the instances. We only have the app and the dev. The other instance hasn't come up yet. Okay, let's go back to Elastic Beanstalk and watch for the instance to come up. You can see the various events over here. It's been almost 3 minutes. Health check says it's okay. Let's see if the instance has been created. I'm sure it's created by this time. EC2, it says 4. That's the prod instance that's coming up right now. Go back to Elastic Beanstalk. It seems like it's ready to go. It's running the application. Let's see if the application is up and running. So let's go to the prod environment, and that would be the prod URL. There's the prod URL. It should have the same application. There it is. It's version 2.0. And the reason it's version 2.0 is because the configuration came from the dev environment, which was version 2.0. And let's see what the test looks like. Test is still version 1.0. And the dev is 2.0. Okay, so we're good to go. Now we can go ahead and look at the configuration of this environment. If you look at scaling, now in scaling, you see how it's saying that there's one instance, it's 1 is the minimum and 4 is the maximum. You can change that. You can say you want the minimum to be 4 and the maximum to be 5. Maybe let me make the minimum to be 2. The maximum to be 4. You can also pick the availability zone. I'm going to say I want it in at least 2 different availability zones. And then I'm going to go in and apply. Or I could actually say this, pick any 2. Not just pick any specific availability zone. Let me just say pick any 2 availability zone. Let me actually change this to 3. And then do an apply. Well, before I do that, scaling triggers. So this is your triggers for scaling. This is your time-based scaling. There's a lot of things that you can do in terms of scaling within Elastic Beanstalk, right? So let me go ahead and apply. What I'm really looking for is 3 instances to be up. Apply, Elastic Beanstalk. There it is. The environment is coming up. Click on prod. It's been a few minutes. This is when it's actually launching a bunch of machines for me. We should have a total of 3 instances across 2 availability zones. That's where the health check is calling upon the service. Health check is good. Everything is updated. So we have a production environment. Okay, let me go to my EC2, prove that we have gotten 3 instances. So as you can see, for prod, we have 3 instances up and running. That's great. And if I go to my production URL, it's running. Served by 3 different servers. Health check.jsp, and that returns all good. This is exactly the URL that the load balancer calls upon to ensure that the application is up and running. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Elastic Beanstalk is a pretty powerful application server environment. Right, so in summary, we took a deeper look at the console. We saw where configurations are, where the log files are. We were able to do vertical scalability, horizontal scalability. I showed you how you can improve the performance of the server by changing the JVM settings. You could do that. We also saw how we can actually save the configuration and load the configuration, how we can clone the environment, all kinds of things. It's a pretty cool managed application server environment in the cloud.